Hi, Hye Jin. How are you?
I'm good. Sit down. Oof.
Yeah, that's much better. Whoa, you've gotten bigger since the last time I saw you.
So have you. How's everything going these days?
I'm doing great. Except the, extra 30 pounds I seem to be carrying. It can be really tiring sometimes.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I kind of want just to get over with this. 9 months is way too long. Men really need to appreciate us women.
I feel you. I feel you. I'm just nervous and worried about how hard labor is gonna be. What if my body acts weird and I can't push it out?
You'll be fine. I asked my doctor the same thing, and he said that we have this natural hormone in our bodies that's released when we go in through labor. And I think he called it oxytocin.
Oxytocin. I feel like I haven't heard that word since I graduated, which was like, what, a gazillion years ago? I don't remember what that does. How is that supposed to help me during labor?
Well, when the baby is anxious to leave the mother's womb, our uterus muscle lining stretches.
Mm-hmm.
This sends messages and alerts the hypothalamus in the brain to release some oxytocin. Then my doctor said that this hormone binds to some receptors on the uterus myometrial layer to activate some cascade of events to enhance the contraction and release even more oxytocin, like positive feedback, until the baby's out. I'm sure no other hormone can top that. It's a lot of work women have to go through during labor. And if we didn't have it, I'm sure, human species would probably be extinct.
Oh yes, I remember now from my old anatomy class. Let me tell you about one of the biggest roles of that hormone. Oxytocin is involved in a process which is exclusive to women like us who are mothers or going to be. Breastfeeding, or the official term, lactation.
Yes, I think that lactation is such an important role of oxytocin. Why don't you start off by talking about what lactation is?
Yes, I think that's a good point to begin our discussion. So, lactation is the process of a woman releasing milk via the mammary glands, which are located in her breasts. She uses to feed the baby. An important thing to remember about lactation is that it only happens during the time after a woman gives birth, so roughly 6 months or so.
Oh, I see. So it's like a time process? So kind of like this hormone needs to be released and turned on and off, kind of that sort of thing?
Yes, exactly, Hye Jin. The hormones involved are a lot, like progesterone, estrogen, prolactin, glucocorticoids, growth hormone, placental prolactin, and our current favorite, oxytocin.
Oh boy, that sounds like a lot is going on.
Yes, it's a complex process, but I will focus on 2 hormones for our discussion. Prolactin, which stimulates production of milk, and oxytocin, which is involved in the release or ejection of the milk. Now, to answer your initial question about the timing of the oxytocin release.
Yes.
Similar to labor, lactation follows a positive feedback loop. The baby suckling of the nipple activates specific mechanoreceptors. The suckling will activate the hypothalamus to trigger the release of oxytocin.
Hey, I'm loving this conversation, but I kind of have to go. My baby and I have to just restroom break.
Oh yeah, me too. Okay, I'm coming.
Oh, so refreshing. Hey.
Glad that's over with.
Hey, did you know that men need oxytocin too?
Whoa, no way. I thought it was a women's hormone.
Yeah, I'm reading here that apart from labor and lactation in women, it has endocrine and paracrine influences on the male reproductive system.
What do you mean influences the male reproductive system?
So, for instance, it's known that oxytocin is synthesized within the testes, epididymis, and the prostate gland. And so there's oxytocin receptors all throughout the reproductive tract. And it controls the androgen levels in these tissues by stimulating the conversion of testosterone to DHT, which is critical for sexual development, especially for the younger boys at puberty.
Yes, yeah. Wow, I didn't know oxytocin helps guys with developing male characteristics.
Yeah, and it probably has other roles in men.
Yes, you're right. I remember now. Oxytocin also plays roles in men's reproductive systems. I would like to add another function to those that you just explained.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, so oxytocin is responsible for contracting the vas deferens and pushing the sperm and semen forward for ejaculation. So oxytocin is responsible for not only nourishing the baby through breastfeeding, but it also plays a role in creating the baby itself. Without oxytocin, the sperm would not be able to exit the male body and enter the female's vagina to penetrate the ova.
You're right. Hormones play God and determine life or not.
It's scary but interesting, right? But let's take a break from this and get some food now.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Hey, I got more snacks.
Yay!
Hey, do you want to watch some TV?
Yes, I would love to.
I'm watching this show where they do talks about health-related topics and diseases.
Okay, sure, why not?
All right, let's see what they got.
America, this is Dr. Singh and
Dr. Kim here on the Happy Hormone Show, and tonight we are going to be discussing a few health conditions related to a hormone called oxytocin.
But first, let's talk about what oxytocin is.
Here are some important facts to know about the oxytocin hormone.
Oxytocin is secreted by the pituitary gland, which is a bean-shaped gland located in the brain under the hypothalamus, behind the bridge of the nose. Specifically, it is the posterior lobe of the pituitary which secretes oxytocin.
However, the production of oxytocin is by the hypothalamus, which relays the hormone via neurosecretory cells to the posterior lobe for storage and release.
Within the hypothalamus, there are nuclei, which are groups of neuronal cell bodies. Oxytocin is produced specifically by the paraventricular nucleus, which is shown in blue in the diagram. The paraventricular nucleus is a neural connection to the posterior pituitary gland used to transport oxytocin. You can see the paraventricular nucleus axons extending to the posterior lobe.
Oxytocin is a peptide hormone which consists of 9 amino acids. These 9 amino acids are hydrophilic and polar. Oxytocin's hydrophilic nature does not allow it to cross the hydrophobic cell membrane on its own. Therefore, it requires a cell surface receptor in order to enter the cell. Oxytocin receptors are a family of G protein receptors which use calcium as a secondary messenger. For example, there are oxytocin receptors in the uterine myometrium.
Oxytocin has many functions such as contracting the uterus during labor, involved in lactation in women, and ejaculation in males. It promotes trust, decreases fear, and helps recover after bad social interactions.
Not only is the love hormone involved with maternal roles and reproduction, it is also involved with our physiological health. It plays a role in mother-to-infant relationship and even increases the bond between couples, as well as increasing sexual arousal between partners.
You mentioned psychological health. Can you think of some psychological disorders which are associated with oxytocin levels?
Yes, one disease comes to my mind immediately: autism spectrum disorder. aka ASD.
Autism. Could you please tell our viewers a little bit more about this disease and how the oxytocin plays a role?
ASD is a developmental disorder, and it has a sliding scale of variable severity. It is characterized by difficulty in social interaction and communication. We discussed earlier how oxytocin plays a role in communication of certain emotions like generosity, trust, and attachment, which are important for social interactions. So, it makes sense that oxytocin levels are related to ASD.
Yes. But could you tell our viewers, or in general, how exactly the levels of oxytocin are altered, if they are altered at all?
I'm glad you asked that because low levels of oxytocin are observed with these patients.
How are they low? Is it due to a lack of production of oxytocin, or maybe the lack of hormone receptors?
Well, it has to do with the production, and it is a problem that starts at the genetic level. I have seen that autistic patients typically have inactive OXTR, oxytocin, genes due to hypermethylation. I should add, there is significant hypermethylation of OXTR regions in individuals with autism when compared to controls. Hypermethylation is increased methylation of the cytosine and adenosine residues in DNA and essentially functions to cause gene inactivation.
Wait, this is starting to sound like a little bit of a genetics class, right? Could you please tell our viewers what hypermethylation of oxytocin genes ultimately means for an individual's oxytocin levels?
Yes. So, patients with ASD have hypermethylated oxytocin genes, making them have lower oxytocin levels, and this makes sense given the role of the hormone oxytocin in symptoms of ASD.
Oh, I see. So individuals with ASD have lower levels of oxytocin, and it seems that it's due to the hypermethylation of the oxytocin genes.
Yes, exactly.
Fascinating. But is there a treatment for this?
Although there is no FDA-approved treatment for ASD using oxytocin, several clinical trials of oxytocin administration in autistic patients showed a significant improvement in social skills. This is something that is still under work, but hopefully oxytocin administration can help people with ASD in the future.
Yes, I hope that's true. And it seems like oxytocin could have real beneficial effects for those with autism. While ASD is caused by low oxytocin levels, there are also diseases associated with high oxytocin levels.
Yes, you're right, there are. Can you tell us about one?
Of course. Where there's high oxytocin levels, there is benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH for short. This formation of a benign tumor in the prostate gland is very common among aging men.
What happens when the tumor is in the prostate gland?
Well, the prostate gland enlarges and blocks bladder outflow. The increase in the muscle tone of the prostate contributes further to the compression of the urethra, urine retention, followed by morbidity.
Ooh, that sounds painful, not having to urinate in peace. Can you tell us about how oxytocin levels play a role in developing BPH?
Sure. Oxytocin levels have been found to rise in patients with BPH. This may be because there's a lack of normal feedback regulatory loops of androgens on oxytocin. There's an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase, which is involved in the conversion of testosterone to DHT. This enzyme is expressed in many tissues, but oxytocin specifically modulates the enzyme expression in the prostate gland. Hence, so if there's more oxytocin present, more DHT is being converted. Also, oxytocin has direct effects on increasing cell proliferation, so that even further contributes to the overgrowth of cells in the prostate gland.
I see, that's a great explanation. Are there any ways to treat BPH?
Yes, thankfully there's a wide variety of treatments available for patients with BPH. For example, patients may be given alpha blocker medication to relax the bladder and prostate muscles, and this helps urination easier. You also have 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, which may be administered to block or deactivate the conversion of more DHT.
I see. But what if the medications are not enough for patients with a larger prostate gland? Are there any surgical procedures patients can go through?
Yes, there are, and they're minimally invasive because surgeons use instruments such as inserting a lighted scope into the urethra to remove parts or make small cuts in the prostate gland. There are even microwave therapies or needle ablations, which use the wave energy to destroy portions of the enlarged prostate to restore easy urine passage. However, to prevent BPH from developing, it matters to keep a healthy lifestyle and go when you have to go.
You're right. Especially if you're a student and need to go, just raise your hand and say that you are preventing the possibility of BPH by paying a visit to the bathroom.
Yes, and if I'm correct, there are even more problems with oxytocin deficiency than excessive oxytocin. Dr. Singh, are there any other diseases related to low levels of oxytocin?
Sure, unfortunately, there are many. I'll tell you about another psychological disease that's shown to have some links to oxytocin. That is bipolar personality disorder, or BPD.
Could you tell our viewers what exactly BPD entails?
Yes, so individuals with BPD experience difficulties in social cognition and often have insecure attachment styles that disturb interpersonal relationships. They have a fear of compassion, FOC, from others.
I see. How does BPD relate to oxytocin?
Yes, so oxytocin is related to BPD in terms of the emotions, which are influenced by oxytocin. As we talked earlier, the role of oxytocin is facilitating feelings of love and compassion, and it plays an important role in the development of affiliative motivation and social behavior. I have discussed this with some colleagues who are researching BPD and oxytocin, and they have some interesting things to share.
Oh, so this is still a research phase.
Yes, that's right. It's still fairly unexplored.
Then can you tell us a little bit more about the research?
I'd be happy to. So, they conducted an experiment where they measured plasma oxytocin levels, and on a validated self-report scale, FOC for self, FOC for others, and from others in 57 inpatients with BPD and in 43 control patients. They found that BPD patients had lower oxytocin levels and scored higher measures of FOC. And I think this makes sense because, again, the emotions that oxytocin influences are the same as those which are symptomatic in BPD.
I agree. The emotional effects of oxytocin are definitely involved, it seems like.
It was also found that within the BPD group, plasma oxytocin levels were correlated positively with greater levels of recalled parental warmth and negatively with greater FOC from others. I again think the same rationale as for the first finding applies to this one.
It sounds like ASD and BPD have some similarities in terms of how they're related to oxytocin.
What a great observation. Well, both BPD and ASD are disorders whose symptoms include abnormal moods and behaviors. For both, there was correlation with low oxytocin levels, a hormone which is involved in the same behaviors and emotions. So, it has been proposed that administration of oxytocin could be beneficial for these patients. But again, nothing has been officially approved for general treatment yet.
I see. Oh, I know of another disease associated with low oxytocin levels, and it's diabetes. According to the 2020 National Diabetes Statistic Report, 10.5% of the American population is diagnosed with diabetes.
For those of you at home who don't know what diabetes is, it's simply when the body either doesn't make enough insulin or can't use the insulin to make it as well as it should. Because of this, too much sugar sits in the bloodstream and can cause serious health problems.
Yes, and in addition, obesity and diabetes are closely related because being overweight increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
Can you tell us more about how oxytocin is related to diabetes?
Yes. In past animal studies, it suggested that oxytocin can lead to the reversal of obesity, related glucose and insulin disorders, and increases the mRNA expression of all the lipolysis-related genes in differentiated 3T3L1 adipose tissues. With this information, a clinical study was conducted in obese patients and patients diagnosed with type 2 diabetes to explore the correlation between circulating oxytocin levels and the disease.
What did the experts find at the end of the study?
They found that the circulating oxytocin levels were low in the obesity subjects and type 2 diabetes subjects than their normal control group, regardless of the subject's gender.
Oh, that's very interesting. I know that there isn't any definite cure for diabetes, but since you mentioned how animal studies showed that oxytocin can reverse the condition, do you think that this maybe can be applied to humans as well?
Yes, Dr. Singh. I believe that it may be possible, but more research and clinical trials must be conducted before we can get to that assumption. For now, patients with diabetes, and even to prevent this, everyone, I say everyone, needs to eat healthy and exercise regularly. Like Jim Rohn said, take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live.
I definitely agree. Well, that wraps up the talk. This has been Dr. Singh and
Dr. Hye Jin on the Happy Hormone Show.
Stay tuned for next week's talk on COVID-19 influences on gender and hormones.
Wow, that was a coincidence. I guess oxytocin is really important, not only to women, but to everyone for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, I think it's cool that this hormone has so many functions.
All right, oxytocin, I have complete faith in you.
We got this.
Ooh,
Oh, time to go now.
I need some help. Help me. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
See ya. See you next time.